we take the philosophy, especially when we're testing, it's like there's no such thing as a failed test. We're going to learn something. If we're running tests and we don't learn from it, that's a failed test. Like, that's a waste.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Destination Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Stoker, along with my co-host, Jordan Barker.
Hello, Adam.
What's up, Jordan?
How are you, man?
I'm so good.
What have you been up to?
Good.
What have you been up to?
I'm sad, actually.
Why?
I'm really sad.
Why are you sad?
I think it's important that we announce to everybody that you are going to move from the co-host position to a little more of a guest role.
That makes sense. Is that, and just to be clear, that's because of a ratings issue? Is that why we're doing that?
We do have one-star rating. I don't know if you've looked at that. We got one. We've got lots of 5 stars, but we do have that one star. Okay. And I felt like that was directly tied to your performance on the podcast.
That makes sense. I think that's fair. I take full responsibility. That's fair.
No, I think I am sad. I'm disappointed because, for those of you that have been following the podcast and listening, Jordan has just taken on a major project with one of our clients, and we'll even be working a lot on site with them for the next several months and probably for the foreseeable future. And so Jordan will be on the podcast periodically when it makes sense, but more in a guest role than a co-host role. So,
which it'll be interesting to follow the ratings. Like, I guess if the ratings go up, to your point, that's because of me.
So
I guess,
leave it to the numbers guy.
Yeah,
okay, you want to let the ratings speak for themselves.
It's an A/B test.
Let the data talk.
Here we go.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, hopefully the ratings don't go down because we don't have much control over that specific part of it. But we will try to bring you back as much as we can.
Sounds
so
good.
I wanted to treat today normally we'll bring on a guest, you and I will interview them, and in a lot of cases we don't necessarily share a lot of our own learnings and insight. It'll come up here and there. But with you taking a little more of a passive role on the podcast, I wanted to give everybody the opportunity to hear some of the lessons learned and some of the guidance that you have with your expertise, especially in digital marketing for tourism destinations.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that?
I feel like let's do it. I'm nervous. I'm the most nervous I've ever been on this podcast, but I'm ready. Let's do this.
Is that why you're sweating?
That's why I'm sweating.
Okay.
Yeah. I just have
All right.
overactive sweat glands too, so that might be a combination of the two. I'm not sure.
I'm not familiar with that sickness. Is it classified as a sickness?
We'll do a special when I come back as a guest. We will do a special episode dedicated to
We'll
this.
A/B test your sweat glands as well,
yes.
and just kind of see how it performs.
Yes,
okay.
absolutely. Yep, let's do that.
This is amazing. What a good start to this episode.
So far, so good.
Let's get serious, shall we? Let's do it. So, for those of you that aren't aware, Jordan and I have been in the tourism industry for a long time. 3 years ago, he left a job in the tech industry to purchase Relic, the advertising agency that he and I own together, from the previous owner. And I had been at the agency for, I think, now it's 8.5 years, but at the time I think it was almost 6. And Jordan and I had been friends since high school and decided to buy this business together, and it was kind of an intro for Jordan into the tourism industry, and man, it's been a wild ride so far, right?
Yes, it has. It's been fun. I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting, coming from the tech world, just understanding what's important to the tourism industry, and specifically how you think about marketing investments and how you track things, very different in some ways and very similar in other ways, and so it's been kind of fun to see the technologies that we used at tech companies, and as we've seen the evolution of the tourism industry, some of those tools have started to make their way. We just had a podcast this past week talking about personalization, right? And so that's something that the tech industry has been doing for quite some time, and the tourism industry has been doing that for some time as well, but it's certainly gaining more and more momentum. So it's been kind of fun to be able to see what's important to the various industries at different times. And so, yeah, it's been fun to see the similarities and also the differences.
Cool. Well, what surprised you coming into the tourism industry? What was unexpected?
Yeah, I don't know that I had a lot of expectations per se, but I think in the tourism industry, one thing that I really respect and admire is people who are in the tourism industry are very passionate about the tourism industry. And that might sound cliche, but a lot of the industries that are out there, like even within the tech community, I think, yes, there are certain companies that have done a really good job of building that culture, But I think, I worked for companies where there wasn't a ton of passion. It was people were clocking in and clocking out and just doing it to pick up a paycheck. I think most individuals that are in the tourism industry genuinely care about the destination that they're promoting, and they're really passionate about it. And that bleeds into everything that they do, from the dedication, but it also bleeds into the messaging and how they convey that message and that spirit, outside of their destination. And so for me, it's been kind of fun to see destinations where you could, we interface with a lot of different destinations, right? Whether it's on the podcast or out at different trade shows or whatever. And, everyone is really, really proud of their destination. They want to tell the world about it. So for me, that was kind of fun to be able to see, regardless, some destinations are bigger than others, and they have more, some destinations have more to kind of showcase than others. But it really kind of doesn't matter. I feel like everyone has this passion and they want to tell the world about why they should come to their destination. So that's been a lot of fun for me to see. Awesome.
And you've run now digital marketing campaigns, or at least directed the team on running digital marketing campaigns for dozens of destinations now across the country. And, one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, has your experience marketing in the tourism industry, has it affected the way you travel or the way when you go visit a destination, how you approach it?
Yeah, it's kind of like, I remember taking we might have even talked about this on the podcast, but I remember going to a film class in college, and we would analyze and pick films apart. And that definitely changed the way, whenever I'd go to the movies, it was, I don't want to say it was like less enjoyable, but I definitely was more cognizant of, the lighting. I paid more attention to the lighting, and I paid more attention to the different aspects of the story and the story arcs and things like that. And I think for me, whenever I go to a new destination, I think I definitely think about it, differently. I look at the branding, I look at the messaging, and I look at the brand, the brand promise. And when I get there, so before I would go to a destination and I would just kind of go, I think just like most tourists, I would say, hey, I want to go visit this thing. And I didn't really sit there and, analyze it. But I think it's probably similar to when I had the film class, and I think about the destination in a much different way. And even when I'm looking at the website, I'm picking
planning
apart.
Your trip.
I'm like, oh man, if they did this differently, or this is such a bad experience, or this is amazing, this is really cool. What a cool trip planner or itinerary planner, whatever the case may be. I definitely take more of an analytical approach, which I didn't necessarily expect either. So, that's a good question. But, I think I do think about it differently.
Fun. Yeah. Yep. I've noticed the same thing.
Yeah.
We actually just got back from Charleston, South Carolina, and I'm like, where are the signs?
Yeah.
There are not enough wayfinding signs. Charleston, don't be mad. But, I just caught myself just looking at stuff that in the past I don't think I ever would have noticed in the same way.
Yeah. What about, okay. Like, I know I'm the...
Oh, man.
Can I ask you a question? Am I allowed?
I feel like if I said no now, our listeners would think I'm a jerk.
It would be uncomfortable.
Okay. Yeah, so you know what? Yes.
I backed you into a corner.
Yeah, that was a little unfair, but
So you've been in the tourism industry for how long?
So I've been in the tourism industry now for 7 years.
Okay.
Almost 8.
Okay, so almost 8 years. Have you seen, how would you describe the evolution of the tourism industry? So from when you've started and where you've seen it, 8 years ago to today, is it similar? Is it vastly different? Is it what have you seen?
Oh man, that's an interesting question. I've seen a lot of change, and it's interesting because I feel like I've evolved with the industry.
Yeah.
I'm not 50 years old, so 8 years is a pretty large portion of my career at this point, and so I feel like it's been fun to evolve with the industry a little bit. But when I got into tourism, digital marketing outside of a little bit of Facebook maybe, but we're not sure if it works, paid search, and we know we need SEO, but we're not really sure which content is most effective. And, that evolution from when it was really kind of I can't say it was a new frontier, because digital marketing had been around for a long time, but it was almost like the early adopters had become really successful. Enterprise companies and large destinations had really done well with the digital marketing tools that were available at the time. And then smaller destinations were kind of late to the party.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And so we worked with a lot of small destinations early on. And so we too were a little late to the party,
Right.
And so I felt like SEO, SEM, paid search, and a little bit of Facebook was really all people were doing for digital. And then you've got I would call them digital partners, like a Utah.com here in Utah, Go Utah, Go Arizona. There's lots of different like partner type websites that are content resources that feed leads to destinations. So I would count those almost as a media purchase as opposed to digital marketing, even though they totally are digital marketing. We kind of classified them differently. So those were happening, and those were working well. But I do feel like digital marketing in and of itself has evolved so much over the last 8 years. I'll give you a perfect example. Email marketing was so poorly utilized when we started in tourism in 2012. I feel like this batch and blast mentality of hey, you know what? We haven't sent an email to our database in a while. Maybe we ought to give it a shot. Or we had an event coming up. So it's like, hey, everybody's interested in, I don't know, the basket weaving festival. So we're going to send out
that festival. One of my favorites.
It's the best.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. No, but so we're going to send everyone in our database an advisement about this upcoming event that has nothing to do with 90% of our database, right?
Right.
So the segmentation ability that's come available over the last several years, the ability to segment your audience through email marketing automation, I think it has been a complete game changer for the marketing funnel in general for tourism. And I bet you didn't expect this long of an answer.
This is awesome. Keep going.
But I feel like now, and we'll talk about the issues with attribution in tourism. We've talked about it a lot, but I want to talk a little bit about it today. Those issues were there, and the bridge was really distant, right? It was really difficult to track through the funnel because we're running, let's call it a Facebook ad, right? Yeah. We run that ad. Somebody may book a trip, but we have no idea if that ad was what led them to book the trip. Yeah. And now, within Facebook, we can run a lead gen ad. And we can, without them leaving the platform, we can pass that information directly into our email marketing automation tool, and we can then track their interaction with our content, whether it be through the emails that we send or on the website, and then we can drop them into an audience bucket or a persona bucket within our database. And now we only send the basket weaving festival invite to people that care about basket weaving. I've never heard of a basket weaving festival. I have no idea why this is my example. But here we are.
Yep, I like it.
But yeah, I think that's the type of evolution, the ability to take the tools as the platforms have improved their products, leveraging those improvements to track more in the marketing funnel for tourism has been kind of a godsend to the industry.
Yeah, I think it's funny. Even in the last 3 years, I've seen the level of sophistication, even for some of these smaller destinations, really up their game. And I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword, though, I would say, because I think it was the great Spider-Man that once said, no, I don't know who it was. I don't know. I was going to say, with great power comes great responsibility.
It's Spider-Man's uncle. It's his uncle.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for clarifying. But I think it really is true, though, because I think that the stakes are higher, right? Like the more quantifiable the marketing programs are, the stakeholders are interested in where the marketing dollars are going, as they should be, right? So I think that's absolutely appropriate. I think what's interesting in the tech industry, and this would be maybe my caution to the tourism industry, the tech industry is really, and understandably so, they love the idea of creating these marketing engines. So for every dollar I spend, what's the output, what's the ROI on every channel for every program? And that's totally doable, right? The challenge that some of these tech companies run into is they're really hesitant to spend branding and awareness dollars. So they fall in love with, this is our machine and we can predictably quantify what our investment is going to look like. But they're hesitant, or some are hesitant, to really say, okay, we need to increase overall brand awareness, but we're afraid to do that because it's a little bit harder for us to track that, right? And so I think the only kind of caution that will be interesting to follow over the coming years in the tourism industry is, yes, we have a lot of amazing, and we'll talk about attribution here in a minute, but there's a lot of great tools that will help you track the effectiveness of your marketing spend, which is powerful, and that's absolutely the direction we should go. The caveat or the caution I would throw out there would be, there still needs to be this, understanding that there are certain marketing channels that are difficult to quantify precisely. And so I think just, not making sure you don't make that mistake of falling so in love with all of the digital channels and forgetting about some of the other mechanisms that are out there. I think that's something that will be really interesting to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up. And you and I have talked obviously a lot about this off the podcast.
Right.
But I know that you've had a couple of experiences even in your past where the company decided to stop branding spend altogether,
right,
and saw a real negative impact on success. So what I wanted to ask you, and maybe to share with our listeners, is how do you use your digital marketing channels to measure brand effectiveness? And I know that's a difficult question to answer.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think there's a few ways you can do it. One is if you look at, so for example, without getting too into the weeds, let's take paid search, for example, right?
Okay.
So there's brand terms, which are basically keywords that relate back to your destination or your brand that you're bidding on,
so
right?
let's use an example. Let's say we have Garfield County, Utah, which Bryce Canyon is a major component of Bryce Canyon, Utah, or of Garfield County, Utah. So what would a branded keyword for that be?
So that would be like Garfield County, for example, right? Would be an example of that. Or if you're a brand, like if you're Nike or something like that, you're going to bid on the keyword Nike. That's a brand term. Something that you kind of own that is all encompassed in your brand or whatever.
So would Bryce Canyon in that case be probably a brand term?
Yeah, you could absolutely consider that a brand term. So so there's those keywords that are kind of, it makes sense to bid on those, and we could have an entire podcast discussion on whether or not you should bid on those, but like our philosophy is absolutely it makes sense to do that. And then you have your non-brand terms, right, which are things like places to go hiking or different aspects of the destination that are not related to the brand itself, right? So if you think about shutting those off, so in your example that you just mentioned, in a previous company that I was at, we decided to shut those off and kind of see what happens, right? Well, the challenge is if you look at paid search as a channel, something has to go out and generate that demand, if that makes sense. So like I'm just going to type in these keywords, but if I don't know that the brand exists, I'm never going to be able to go as a marketer, go capture that search term of someone who's bidding, or who's looking for that answer.
Yeah, so you're saying if nobody's ever heard of Bryce Canyon, guess what? You're never going to get a paid search conversion from that person. Okay.
So I might fall in love with paid search, and I might say, I'm going to put all of my marketing dollars into paid search because it's really quantifiable. I know it's cost effective. But at the same time, I've got to be mindful that there's only a finite number of people that are searching for Bryce Canyon at any given time, right? So I need to go increase awareness around that. And the way that I do that is by leveraging other channels that are more brand awareness focused, right? So these are things like billboards and outdoor and Facebook and other channels where you can do more of a branding and awareness initiative. And if you don't do that, then you just limit that bucket that's available to you within paid search. So I think that's the mistake that a lot of companies make is they say, oh, we're going to put all of our eggs in this basket because I can quantify it. My return on my investment is solid. That all makes sense, and I absolutely agree with that. But I think you can't have one or the other. So a lot of times people fall in love with that, and then they hit this diminishing return at some point, and they're like, man, why can't I scale this? It's because there's not demand for your brand or your product or whatever it is you're trying to market, and you have to have a cohesive marketing plan. You can't just fall in love with one channel.
Yeah, I'm really glad you walked us through that example, and I'm going to ask you a follow-up question that might feel a little nerdy, but I think we'll be able to get through it with me still understanding it.
Okay.
But we'll try it. So let's say I'm a destination. I'm getting very few keyword searches.
Okay.
And so it's like I've got my branded keyword paid search campaign live, but I'm not spending very much because there's just not a lot of people searching for the attractions in my area, right? Does that mean that I have a branding problem and I need to spend more money in awareness-based channels?
Yeah, I think it's a good indicator. I think obviously there's, in a vacuum, I would say yes, there's probably a few variables that could go into that. But I think that goes back to having data and having the ability to measure that data with the different attribution tools and with Google Analytics and all of the platforms that exist out there in terms of, ad platforms and their reporting and availability of data. I think what you want to try to do is that's where the awareness budget comes into play. And that's where it's like, okay, what happens if I ramp up my awareness spend? And what happens if I measure awareness today? And what impact does that have on paid search, for example, right? Like 6 months from now. So like if I'm running all these branding and awareness initiatives, can I actually increase the number of people that are searching for Bryce Canyon or whatever insert destination here, whatever those keywords are. And I think that's one way that you could measure the impact of that, right? And try to understand some of these that are a little bit harder to quantify. Well, I think you have to establish baselines, and then you have to measure against those baselines, right? So I think that's kind of the key, is understanding how isolating a single variable and saying, okay, here's my baseline. How do I then introduce another marketing channel? And then how do I measure against that to make sure that that's really what's impacting the lift or lack thereof?
Yeah, and marketing is trial and error.
Absolutely.
Right? And so people that want to take this magic formula and say, I'm going to plug this in for every destination and it's going to work, right? You need this exact amount on branding and this exact amount on paid search and this exact amount on SEO. These are the guys that are just missing, and we've tried, early on in our tourism, our experience in tourism, we thought, oh man, we could probably just duplicate what we're doing, change the creative to something completely original, but duplicate the plan, right? And that just does not work.
That's why marketing's so hard. I think even you go to these conferences and people are up on stage, and it's awesome because you definitely want to take elements of the best practices and innovative, new, fresh ideas. So there's a ton of value there. But I think, again, sometimes the mistake or frustration that people have is they walk away and they feel like that's the playbook. And then they go try to implement those same things at their destination, and they can't understand why it didn't work. And so that's where it goes back to really understanding your personas and who you're going after and what makes them tick, what the watering holes are for them. Because you could have a destination that has a $15 million, $25 million a year budget that's up on stage talking about all these really cool things that they've done, and then you take that back to your destination, and a lot of those same tactics, a lot of those same quote-unquote watering holes, right, where their audience is hanging out and where they're reaching that audience, that might not make sense for your destination. So I think that's something that is sometimes frustrating for people, and they want this formula. There's definitely best practices. There's definitely, okay, if you're going to use Facebook, here's how to do it. And here's
start here, right?
Start here. Here's your baseline. But I think it goes back to, and there's no silver bullet, I guess. It really is, how do we think about our personas and our audience, and how do we reach them effectively?
And I would say it's educate yourself as much as you can prior to testing, so you can have a really educated guess as to what you should be testing, and then test small.
Right.
Don't bet the farm on a test, right? So that's another thing that I think has helped us in the industry.
And I think, too, just, we talk about random acts of marketing, and there's a lot of those that happen. And so I think having a roadmap, or like you say, a theory or a hypothesis to be able to say, hey, I think this is what we think will happen, and then either validate that or invalidate that, and then learn and be prepared to pivot, right? So a lot of times what we'll do with our clients, right, is we'll have a testing roadmap, and we'll say, here's the things that we want to test this quarter. And we go through that list. But sometimes we get 2 tests deep, and all of a sudden we've learned something that we didn't know before. And so we have to pivot. We have to say, hey, wait a second, this went a different direction than we thought it was going to. We need to kind of alter our roadmap to plan accordingly. So I think that's the other thing. So be deliberate about what you're going to do, but be open and understand, be willing to look at the data, interpret the data, and then as a result, pivot as needed, right?
Perfect. Yeah. And I'm going to go back a little bit to that Bryce Canyon example. Yeah. So I would say if there's not as many Bryce Canyon searches as you would like, I would say create an awareness campaign that's not a 30% of your budget, but a small campaign.
You got it.
See if you get additional searches and conversions in paid search. And if that happens, test a little bigger, and then test a little bigger, and see where that goes. You may be wrong. You may find that there's no additional demand from those channels, and that's why we test small.
Yeah, and I think a lot of folks, too, that we talk to, they'll get really frustrated by quote-unquote, I'm using lots of air quotes today.
They're really good.
Sorry. No one can see
these
them.
Air quotes may be some of the best air
really
quotes
good.
I've seen. Yeah.
The form is really on point, I feel like. Look at them. But I think there's no such thing as a failed test. And I know that's a lot of people might disagree with that. But I think the important thing is you're going to get it wrong. In fact, you're probably going to get it wrong more times than you'll get it right.
Well, doesn't losing to the control mean you're probably doing something right?
Totally, right? Exactly. Because you're basically saying, what is the winning version of whatever I'm going to test, whether that's a homepage or an ad or ad copy or a message. And so to your point, if you run a test and it loses, it's like, cool, I've got something here. Let me try to dethrone the incumbent. Basically, you still want to try to do that, but I think it validates whatever you're doing. You're like, okay, it can't be that bad. At least it's better than this, right? But I think there's always something to be learned, and so we take the philosophy, especially when we're testing. It's like there's no such thing as a failed test. We're going to learn something. If we're running tests and we don't learn from it, that's a failed test. Like that's a waste. But if we say, hey, we tried this was the outcome, here's what we learned about it, and this is either what we're not going to do in the future, or we know that this image of this person doesn't resonate with our audience. So what if we tweak that? Or we know that the blue background versus the red background, that outperformed this by 14% or whatever. Then we have, we can either, again, validate or invalidate the hypothesis. So no such thing as a failed test.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's a valuable thing. I think in marketing, you get a lot of people that have a little bit of imposter syndrome where they're like, oh man, I don't know if I'm doing this right. I don't know if I should even be doing this. And the answer is if you're testing and learning, even if your test, quote unquote, with your air quotes, was a failed test where you didn't beat the control, you're learning. And so, I think it's important that you don't get discouraged as you're going. And as long as you're testing and learning, then you are definitely going in the right direction. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'm scared.
We only have your brain today for so long, so I want to make sure that we utilize it the best we can. Ugh. I want to know, in your last several years in being in tourism marketing, what is the most underutilized digital marketing tool that you've seen?
Google Analytics. I would say Google Analytics.
Tell me about that.
I think the reason that people are so, I think it's so tempting to try to buy a new piece of technology, right? So it's like, okay, what we need, more insight, more visibility. We need to improve some process. And I think it always goes back to like, okay, what are you getting out of Google Analytics and how comfortable and familiar are you with it? It's a free platform. There is a paid version, obviously, but I would venture to guess that most of the folks that are listening are on the free version of GA, Google Analytics. And so I think that if you take the time to really understand all of the data that's available and kind of going above and beyond yes, I know that 42% of my audience is female. And yes, I know that the age breakout looks like this, and there's this many people. But looking at how they leverage and use the site and understanding which are the most important pages on the site, what the journey looks like you can see all of this. So you can see the visitor went from this page, then they went to this page, then they went to this page, and then they exited, right? So I think there's a lot of extraction that you can actually do from data that's at your fingertips that's free. And so I think, a lot of times we'll talk to prospective clients and things like that, and we'll say, tell me a little bit about the makeup of your audience. And they'll give us what they think their audience looks like. And then we'll dive into Google Analytics. Sometimes it's totally accurate. Other times it's completely wrong, right? So there's a disconnect. Either they're getting the wrong audience to their site, right? And that needs to be changed, or they just don't have a good grasp on who their target audience is. So I think that Google Analytics, is very underutilized. Okay. And I think that there's a lot of, there's just a lot of unknown. So I would just say, take the time. There's a lot of great resources that are out there.
So that's what I was going to ask you. Let's say I'm a destination marketer. Yeah. I know how to look at Google Analytics, and I can probably click on a few tabs and get a little dangerous, but I definitely don't know how to go deeper.
Yeah.
Tell me what resources are out there to help me understand how to go deeper in Google Analytics.
That sounds like something that we should probably create, honestly. I actually think there's a play there for us to walk people through. If you're a destination, here's kind of some advanced Google Analytics, not tactics, but
training,
right? Yeah, exactly. But there's a lot of great tools out there, so for example, that are free. So YouTube, obviously, there's a ton of video tutorials that are out there. Lynda.com has some great tutorials as well. They have a free trial that you could do. There's another site, I think it's Analytics Mania, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
So there's a variety of different places that you can go to get watch tutorials and watch videos, and it's all step-by-step stuff. And I think that, obviously most destination marketers, they have multiple, marketing is usually one aspect of their role.
Yeah.
And so I totally get and can appreciate that you've got a lot of hats that you have to wear, and marketing is one. And then if you have the marketing bucket, data analytics and analysis is a portion of that marketing bucket too, right? So it's not always super easy, but I think if you can carve out the time to really just kind of learn a little bit more about Google Analytics, sorry. And, I think there's an opportunity there for you to really unlock some data. And sometimes there's some pretty interesting findings there that you probably weren't aware of.
Great. And for those of you that are listening, maybe we'll post a link to maybe a YouTube video that we find to be beneficial. Also, we'll put the link to lynda.com, but it's not terribly complicated to get to lynda.com and start a free trial. But we'll put it in there anyway,
we can do that.
So that you guys can be able to find those resources. And if we do create a Google Analytics specifically for tourism destinations video or training, we'll provide that link after the fact and maybe post it in the Destination Marketers LinkedIn group, the Destination Marketers Facebook group, and that way, you guys can find those resources as they become available.
Shameless plug. Nice work.
Right?
Nicely done.
It's good stuff.
Way to weave that in there. Yep.
Another question for you, Jordan. You talk about how Google Analytics is one of the most underutilized tools. What's something that people kind of fall in love with that maybe is overutilized a word?
Yeah, I know what you mean, though. I think I'm trying to think. I can't think of a single piece of technology. I would just say technology is the solution for everything is probably a very common.
Technology can't replace education.
Yeah, right. So it's like, okay, I've got an issue. I've got to go find some technology. But if you don't understand how to use the technology, then the technology can't be utilized in its full capacity, right? But I think people go to a trade show or a conference again, and there's the latest and greatest. And I think there's definitely an element of staying up to date, and I think that's the fine balance that marketers everywhere in every industry kind of struggle with, right? We've talked a little bit about this on the podcast, is because there's so many options that are out there. How do you know if it's a flash in the pan, and this is something that's going to be here today, gone tomorrow, versus something that has some real staying power that is truly solving an industry problem?
Well, and hopefully we're helping with that, right? Because we really like to look closely at the technology that we're going to have on the show, right? If we have a guest come on the show, it's somebody we feel pretty confident is going to be a valuable resource for our listeners. We may have guests that talk about a specific technology or something like that, but if we bring somebody on the show, I think you better believe that we think that this is a great resource for the destination marketing industry.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the things we've really tried to do, is because there's so many different. There's a guy, and we might have talked about him on the show, but there's a guy by the name of Scott Brinker, and he's a technologist, and he actually runs a conference that talks about technology and marketing technology specifically. But he's been in the game for quite some time, and so he always puts together these slides of the evolution of technology, and I think he starts maybe 10 years ago or so, and he shows the number of marketing technology tools available, and there's a small handful. Fast forward to today, and there's something like 8,000 plus, and you can't even read the logos on the slide because there's so many. So I think one of the things, to your point, that we've really tried to do is try to weed through those and surface the ones that we feel like are impactful. And we talk to a lot of marketing technology companies, right? And I think that's part of our job as an agency, is to try to understand the difference between those, the flash in the pans versus those that are really solving an issue that needs to be solved. And so I think hopefully that's something we'll continue to do on the show, is bring folks that are making a difference in the tourism industry and letting you guys know about it.
Great. I think the last major question I'm going to ask you, and we've alluded to it a couple times so far, let's talk about attribution in tourism. I want your opinion on kind of where's the industry at, what steps are being taken to solve the problem, and maybe anything else that we're not thinking about for an attribution.
It's a good question. I think, again, because digital marketing is so trackable, everyone for years has really just kind of looked at everything from a last click. And what that really means, for just so everyone's all on the same page.
And maybe for those that don't know, let's talk about what attribution is. Do you want me to? Want to?
Why don't I feel like you should?
Okay,
I feel like
I'll do it. Attribution is really as simple as attributing credit for what marketing activities drove a conversion. So in the in the destination marketing space, what drove the visitor? And this is where, when Jordan talks about last click, it's really important for us to understand what philosophy we're looking at this with, because we talked about paid search earlier. And if you just look at paid search but don't look at what drove the action of performing that search, you're missing part of the equation, right? So hopefully that's a little bit of a brief explanation of what attribution is, and maybe you can take us a little deeper.
Yeah, and I think just in digital marketing in general, it's gotten much more complex. As you think about, we as marketers like to think about the customer journey in this nice, straight, linear, motion, where it's like, oh, well, they came to our site, they clicked on an ad, they came to our site, they filled out a brochure request, or they, filled out a trip plan or whatever, or they booked a hotel room. Unfortunately, as we know, the journey is a lot more complex than that, right? And so I think over the years, the conversation is, if you look at it from a last click perspective, basically you can have multiple touch points along that person's journey. So they could have seen a billboard, which then drove them to type in the destination name. Then they clicked on an ad, and then they came to the website, and then they filled out a brochure request, right? So if you were only looking at things from a last click perspective, meaning what was the last channel that they engaged with before performing that action, in this case it was a brochure download, but it could be a hotel room booking or whatever, you would say paid search is doing incredible, and you would turn up spend, and that's where you would invest all of your dollars. And you might be tempted to then stop having any billboards as part of your marketing mix. But in that scenario, what actually drove the person to navigate to Google in the first place was the billboard that they saw advertising your destination. So that's where it gets really complicated. You have offline mechanisms, right? So you think about things like billboards and radio and print and things like that, right? And then you have the marriage of all the digital channels too, right? How do you think about those holistically? But even just looking at the digital channels, again, you could have a banner ad or a display ad that then someone sees, and then they go to Google, and then they convert, and then they end up filling out a lead form. You would never have visibility into that display ad, which that was really what brought them awareness about your destination in the first place. So really what we're talking about in attribution is, to Adam's point, who gets credit? How do we think about the entire customer journey? Making sure that we're correctly allocating our marketing budget appropriately to account for that entire customer journey. So there's some great tools. We've talked about a lot of those on the podcast. And some of those include things like Adara or Arrivalist and others that we've talked about.
And quick update on that, I've actually reached out to both companies this week to try to get them on the podcast, because I would love to have each of those technologies, who are great technologies within the space, discuss their solution and how it benefits each level of destination, right? You've got your major destinations, your state level destinations, and then you've also got your small DMOs. And what we want to have Adara and Arrivalist explain on the podcast is, how do we benefit each level?
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, just wanted to give that update.
Yeah, it makes total sense. So I think that's really what everyone, even outside of the tourism industry, that's what people are trying to solve. Like, attribution is such a buzzword right now in the digital marketing and marketing more broadly community. That's really what everyone's trying to figure out. How do we think about this? What's the right attribution? What's the right way to measure? And it's like, well, wait a second. Isn't digital marketing really easy to track and quantify, and that's why everyone does it? Yes, but I think what we're learning and what we've learned over the past few years is it's way more complicated than that, right? So,
well, especially in tourism.
Absolutely.
Right? When you've got the destination running the ads, hotel collects the revenue, and that bridge is very difficult to create. So, you can have all these attribution models, but unless you have the data to fill in, it's very difficult. So, anyway, what do you think of that as far as the industry goes? Attribution in the industry, what do you think?
I think they're headed the right direction. I think I think there needs to be a tighter alignment, right, between to your point, the office that ends up spending the marketing dollars, the tourism office that spends those dollars, and the hotels and the local community that actually collects those tourist dollars, right, and that revenue. I think there's definitely making some good moves, right? I think that these technologies that you just talked about, it's really cool the way that they track that, and obviously that's helping bridge that gap a little bit. But I think that the conversation needs to continue, right? I think there needs to be continued effort around that, because I think what that allows people to do is, yes, and we've talked about this on the podcast as well, but these dollars are definitely scrutinized in a good way, right? I mean, these are absolutely important to the community, and they should be spent in the most effective way possible. And so I think that those destination marketers that are listening, they feel that, right? They have to report on the results, and I think they feel that. So they're looking for tools that can help justify that expense and feel good about it, right? No one wants to just spend for the sake of spending, right? Like, no one wants to do that. So the more data we have, the more informed decisions we can make, and I think everyone will feel better about that, both the stakeholders that are involved and then those that are actually spending the marketing dollars.
Great. Yeah. Great. Well, Jordan and I talk a lot, and we're definitely, we've gone quite a ways into this episode. I think it's been really valuable stuff. But Jordan, my parting question for you here is there anything that maybe we haven't talked about yet on the podcast or maybe this episode that you feel like the tourism community needs to know?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think understanding how to leverage the different technologies that are out there and available. And I think there's actually a lot of free tools that are available, and I think we've touched on some of those on the show before. But I think that really understanding where you can go to improve your skill set, I think that's something that's important for people to understand too. So what are the resources that are out there? There's a lot of great conferences and trade shows. Might be fun for us to talk about some of those and our experience with where we've seen good trade shows and examples of conferences that we've really enjoyed.
Yeah.
And then I think there's a fair amount of online resources as well that people can go to try to say, okay, look, I know I don't have all the answers, but like, where can I go, right? Like, you can obviously engage with an agency, but if you want to improve your skill set yourself, I think that's maybe something that we could talk about too on the show.
Great. Well, thank you. I've appreciated having you as a co-host here on the show. Sad to see you take more of a passive role on this podcast, but I'm sure we'll get you on plenty.
We will. It's been fun. It's been a lot of fun, man. So I think I'd love to make sure that I continue to be a part of the show, and then we'll keep an eye on those ratings, I guess, right?
See
what happens.
We'll A/B test.
That's
and see what happens.
Let's see what happens.
Well, everybody, just a reminder on a couple of things. One is I would like to ask that if you're enjoying the podcast, and we have thousands of listeners at this point that have been enjoying the podcast or at least listening to it. If you are enjoying it, leave us a rating on whether it's on iTunes or Spotify or Google Play or wherever it is you're listening to the podcast. Leave us a review. That makes a big difference on how easy it is to find us and helping us grow and gain more momentum in the industry. The other thing I want to remind everybody is we've got our 2 social pages and groups. It's on LinkedIn. It's the Destination Marketers LinkedIn group. And then in Facebook, it's also titled Destination Marketers. So go check those out. Request access. We'll approve you if you're in the tourism industry. And we'd love to continue to post episodes. Like I said, the resources from this podcast that we talked about are going to pop up there. And we'd love to hear from you guys on what you're struggling with, what you need help with, and maybe what you'd like us to answer. So thanks again, everybody, for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.